The bullet that killed Garrett Wells's wife could have come from either side. He doesn't care who fired first. He just wants the truth, and he'll burn through outlaws and lawmen alike until someone owns the shot. Garrett Wells sat alone on the porch of his small, weathered cabin, the sun dipping low in the sky. The shadows stretched long across the dusty ground, and every creak of the wooden boards seemed to echo the emptiness in his heart. Just months ago, laughter filled this space, warmth radiated from shared moments with his wife, Clara. Now there was only silence, a painful reminder of her absence. The day of the shootout had started like any other. The town buzzed with its usual energy, but that day turned into a nightmare. Lawmen and outlaws clashed in a frenzy of gunfire. In the chaos, Garrett's world shattered as he helplessly watched Clara fall to the ground, her life extinguished in an instant. The chaos blurred his vision as he ran toward her, desperation fueling his every step. Now grief had turned into an unquenchable thirst for answers. Garrett didn't care who fired first, he just wanted to know why it had to end this way. The townsfolk whispered conflicting stories, each side blaming the other, but all he could hear was Clara's laughter haunting his dreams. Determined to uncover the truth, Garrett saddled his horse and prepared to ride into the unknown, ready to confront anyone who might hold the key to justice for his beloved wife. He would not rest until he found answers or something else entirely. The sun hung high in the sky on that fateful day, casting a false sense of calm over the bustling town. Children played in the streets and shopkeepers called out to customers, but an uneasy tension simmered just beneath the surface. As whispers of a gang's arrival spread, lawmen gathered, their faces set with determination. Garrett had felt it too, a strange tightness in his chest that he couldn't shake. Suddenly, gunfire erupted, shattering the ordinary day into chaos. The sharp crack of bullets filled the air and people screamed as they scattered for cover. Garrett instinctively grabbed Clara's hand as they sought shelter behind the wooden awning of the general store. Their hearts raced in sync, and for a moment they were together, united against the danger outside. But then came the thunderous roar of shots from both sides. Confusion swirled around them, lawmen and outlaws exchanged fire as adrenaline surged through Garrett's veins. He squeezed Clara's hand tighter, urging her to stay close. In one heart-stopping instant, a bullet found its mark. Garrett turned just in time to see Clara collapse, her eyes wide in shock and pain. Time slowed for him as he rushed forward, but all he could hear was the ringing silence in his ears as he cradled her lifeless body. The world around him faded away, leaving only grief and unanswered questions. The days that followed Clara's death felt like a blur to Garrett. Each sunrise brought a fresh wave of anguish, and the once vibrant town now seemed to mock him with its normalcy. He wandered the streets, haunted by memories of Clara's laughter, which echoed in his mind like a cruel reminder of what he had lost. Anger bubbled beneath his surface, directed at both the lawmen who failed to protect her and the outlaws who had started the chaos. Garrett spent sleepless nights replaying the events of that day, searching for a clue that might reveal the truth. He felt trapped between grief and rage, knowing that someone held the key to understanding why Clara was taken from him. The conflicting stories from the townsfolk infuriated him. Each side pointed fingers while he was left with nothing but his pain. Determined not to let her memory fade, Garrett resolved to confront anyone who might know what really happened. He let go of any fear he had about facing the lawmen or bandits. His heart was hardened by loss. He would ride into the fray, demanding answers until he uncovered the truth. If they refused to speak, he was ready to take matters into his own hands, no matter the cost. Justice for Clara was all that mattered now. Garrett rode into town, a storm brewing in his chest. He had heard whispers of blame exchanged between the lawmen and outlaws, each side adamantly denying any responsibility for the bullets that had taken Clara from him. Tension hung thick in the air, palpable as townsfolk watched with wary eyes, caught in a web of divided loyalties. The lawmen insisted they had fired in self-defense, claiming the outlaws had provoked the violence. Meanwhile, the bandits swore they had been ambushed, asserting that the lawmen were the true aggressors. Garrett listened to their conflicting stories, frustration boiling over with every word. They were all pointing fingers, shifting blame while he stood in the middle, desperate for answers and aching with loss. Each day, he confronted them one by one. The sheriff's office was filled with stoic faces unwilling to share what they knew. Outlaws, too, offered nothing but bravado and lies, smirking as they insulted the lawmen's bravery. Garrett felt like he was going in circles, trapped in their endless game of deceit. As he faced these divided factions, determination hardened in his heart. He didn't care about their accusations or their rivalries. All he wanted was the truth about that day, the truth about Clara, and he would stop at nothing to find it, even if it meant stirring the pot further. Determined to find justice for Clara, Garrett threw himself into his quest for answers. Each morning he rode into town with a single purpose, to press both the sheriffs and the outlaws until someone broke and revealed the truth. He began with the sheriff's office, where the air was thick with tension. The lawmen huddled together, whispering, eyes darting. When Garrett demanded to know what really happened during the shootout, they shrugged him off, maintaining their defense of acting in self-preservation. Frustrated but undeterred, Garrett made his way to the saloon, where whispered rumors swirled like smoke. The outlaws lounged at tables, their bravado concealing their fear. They laughed and jested, but when Garrett approached, their expressions shifted. The laughter died as his gaze pinned them down. He asked pointed questions about who fired first or who had aimed at Clara, but they all deflected him with bravado and insult. As days turned into a blur of anger and desperation, Garrett felt the weight of hopelessness pressing down on him. Nights were sleepless as he contemplated his next moves. He vowed that he wouldn't stop until he learned the truth about that terrible day, even if it meant pushing harder against both sides. Each encounter fueled his resolve, igniting a fire within him to uncover the facts, no matter the risks he might have to take. Garrett stormed into the sheriff's office, a place that once felt like a sanctuary now twisted into a den of uncertainty. Sheriff Dawson leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a veneer of indifference masking the tension that radiated from him. "Garrett, I understand your pain," he began, but Garrett cut him off, demanding real answers about the shootout. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably, his voice low and evasive. "You've got to consider that things aren't always black and white." Emotions run high in these situations. Garrett could hardly contain his anger. His wife was dead, and he deserved more than half-hearted platitudes. "Was it self-defense? Who fired first?" he pressed, his voice rising. "There are too many variables at play," Dawson replied dismissively. "We can't rush into conclusions. There are laws to follow." It felt like an excuse designed to protect the very people tasked with upholding justice. Frustrated but undeterred, Garrett left the sheriff's office and sought out others in positions of authority. Each meeting yielded similar results: vague responses, sideways glances, and stern warnings not to take matters into his own hands. They spoke of peacekeeping and lawfulness as if those principles would somehow ease his torment. But all Garrett felt was the churning need for vengeance for Clara's death. He couldn't let their disinterest derail his quest for answers. Garrett approached the saloon where the outlaws gathered, their raucous laughter hanging in the air like smoke. Inside, he spotted a group clustered around a table, their demeanor shifting as they noticed his presence. He walked up to them, determination in his eyes. "I need to know what happened during the shootout," he stated firmly. One outlaw, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, leaned back and smirked. "Why should we tell you anything? You're just a grieving husband looking for someone to blame." Garrett clenched his fists, the insult cutting deep. "You know what happened? Who fired that shot?" he demanded. The room fell silent for a moment, and another outlaw with wild hair and tattoos snaking up his arms finally spoke up. "We didn't start anything. The lawmen came in hot, guns blazing. We didn't mean for anyone to get hurt." Garrett felt a rush of anger at their casual dismissal of Clara's life. "So you're saying they fired first?" he pressed. "Could have been," the scarred man replied nonchalantly, shrugging his shoulders. "But who can remember? It was chaos." The evasive answers only fueled Garrett's frustration. He realized they were more interested in protecting themselves than offering any truth. As he left the saloon, Garrett felt the weight of their disregard heavy on his shoulders. He knew he had to dig deeper. These outlaws were hiding something, and he wouldn't stop until he found it. As Garrett's quest for answers intensified, the atmosphere in town grew increasingly volatile. The air crackled with unspoken tension, and whispers of retribution spread like wildfire. Lawmen and outlaws eyed each other warily, their mutual distrust igniting old rivalries that had long simmered beneath the surface. One afternoon, Garrett witnessed a confrontation at the edge of town. A group of outlaws, emboldened by their anger and his relentless inquiries, confronted Sheriff Dawson and his deputies. Heated words flew back and forth before fists began to swing. Garrett watched as chaos erupted anew, bottles shattered and shouts filled the streets. He felt a knot form in his stomach as he realized that his pursuit of the truth was drawing lines between former acquaintances, turning neighbors into enemies. The sheriff's men tightened their ranks, ready to defend their territory against the perceived threat posed by the outlaws. In turn, the criminals rallied together, unwilling to back down in the face of mounting pressure. Garrett found himself caught in this escalating conflict, torn between seeking justice for Clara and understanding that his actions were fueling violence. Each day brought more skirmishes as both sides sought revenge for past grievances that had little to do with him yet profoundly affected him now. This wasn't just about Clara anymore. It was about survival in a town losing its grip on peace. Determined not to let fear dictate his path, Garrett pressed on in search of clarity amidst the chaos. The tension in Garrett's chest tightened as he faced a choice that felt monumental. Having spent countless days digging for answers, he found himself once again in the sheriff's office, listening to Sheriff Dawson offer yet another vague explanation about the incident that had taken Clara from him. "We're still investigating, Garrett. Just give us some time," the sheriff urged, his tone both condescending and exasperated. Garrett felt rage bubbling beneath the surface. Time was a luxury he could no longer afford. Each passing moment felt like a stab to his heart. He pondered the half-truths they fed him, the deceit disguised as concern for his well-being. If he accepted their excuses, he would be walking away without justice for Clara. Yet a part of him hesitated, torn between the need for resolution and the fear of descending into darkness. As he turned to leave, a thought gripped him. What if he took matters into his own hands? The idea sent a shiver down his spine, but it also ignited a spark of power, a chance to reclaim agency over his suffering. He was done waiting for others to deliver the truth. In that moment, he made a pivotal choice. Stepping out of the sheriff's office, Garrett resolved to confront the outlaws again, this time not just for answers but seeking the kind of justice that could only be obtained through decisive action. A storm was brewing within him, and this time he was ready to unleash it. The sun hung low in the sky as Garrett stood at the crossroads of his grief and fury, ready for the confrontation he had been building toward. He had gathered both key figures from the lawmen and the outlaws, Sheriff Dawson and the scarred outlaw who had dismissed him before, along with a few others, at a clearing on the outskirts of town. The air was thick with tension, and whispers of doubt rippled through the small crowd that had gathered to witness this meeting. "Here's the truth," Garrett began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm not here to hear your excuses or half-truths. I want to know who killed Clara." His gaze locked onto Sheriff Dawson, who shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny. "We've told you time and again that we're still investigating," Dawson replied defensively, but Garrett pressed on undeterred. "You're protecting your own," he shouted, turning to face the outlaws. "And you're hiding behind your bravado. Someone fired that shot. Someone is responsible for my wife's death." The atmosphere crackled with hostility as accusations flew back and forth. Outlaws and lawmen squared off against each other, their old grudges flaring anew. Garrett stood firm, demanding accountability, knowing that this moment might dictate not only his own path but also the fate of everyone involved. With rage fueling him, he was prepared to fight for justice, no matter what it would cost him. As the confrontation reached a fever pitch, Garrett's frustration peaked, and he demanded that both sides reveal what they had been hiding. "Enough with the lies, I want the truth about that day," he shouted, his voice echoing in the tense atmosphere. Then unexpectedly, one of the younger outlaws, visibly shaken by the escalating conflict, stepped forward. "I know what happened," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The crowd fell silent as all eyes turned to him. "It wasn't just us or the lawmen, it was a mistake." He explained that during the shootout, chaos erupted not from calculated aggression but from confusion when another group, an unknown faction, had joined the fray unexpectedly. The wild gunfire had caught everyone off guard. This outsider group had fired first, prompting the lawmen and outlaws to respond defensively. Clara had been an innocent bystander caught in the crossfire of fear and chaos. Garrett's heart raced as these new details sunk in. It shattered everything he thought he knew about that day. The truth painted a more complex picture than simple blame could capture. Lawmen were trying to cover up their failures while outlaws were trying to distance themselves from an uncontrollable situation. The revelation gave Garrett both closure and deeper anguish. His wife had died not just because of malice, but due to a tragic series of missteps. With newfound determination, he vowed to bring this hidden truth to light, knowing it was crucial for honoring Clara's memory. As Garrett stood in the clearing, the weight of the truth began to settle within him. Clara's death was a result of chaotic misunderstandings, not animosity from either side. He realized that accountability was vital for closure, not just for himself, but for the community fractured by fear and resentment over the years. Yet, justice might look different than he initially imagined. Garrett took a deep breath as he pondered his next steps. He could pursue vengeance against those who had wronged him, letting anger consume him like a wildfire. But he also saw an opportunity to shift the narrative in town, a chance to advocate for healing rather than further violence. Perhaps it was time to rally both factions toward understanding and change, instead of fueling their bitter rivalries. In that moment, Garrett chose the path of reconciliation. He would expose the truth but dedicate himself to bringing lawmen and outlaws together, fostering dialogue about their shared responsibility for the chaos that had engulfed them all. This resolution forged a new mission, one that honored Clara's memory by promoting peace in a town plagued by division. As he looked toward the horizon, Garrett felt a flicker of hope take root in his heart. It would be a long journey, but it was one worth taking, honoring his wife's memory by ensuring that no other family would suffer the same fate. Garrett's quest for truth and reconciliation had profound effects on the town, reshaping relationships that had long been defined by distrust and hostility. As he advocated for healing between lawmen and outlaws, the once clear lines separating the two factions began to blur. Conversations sparked between former enemies, fueled by a shared desire to prevent future tragedies like Clara's death. In the weeks following Garrett's revelations, town meetings became a common occurrence. Lawmen and outlaws gathered to discuss how they could work together to create a safer environment. Slowly but surely, grudging respect emerged from dialogues that had once been filled with accusations and resentment. The community began to realize that their struggles were not just against each other, but against a cycle of violence that harmed everyone. Garrett watched as old wounds started to heal, witnessing a transformation in the townsfolk. The atmosphere shifted from one of fear to tentative hope. Neighbors who had avoided each other now shared meals and stories, united by a common goal. Garrett felt a sense of purpose growing within him. Not only was he honoring Clara's memory, but he was also helping to forge a new chapter for the town. Yet challenges remained. Not everyone was ready to embrace change, some clung stubbornly to old grudges. But Garrett knew this journey was just beginning. He remained steadfast in his mission, committed to guiding his community toward understanding and unity, ensuring Clara's legacy would live on in a more peaceful world. As Garrett stood on the porch of his cabin, twilight casting long shadows over the land, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The pain of losing Clara was still raw, a wound that had been both a torment and a catalyst for change. He had sought the truth fiercely, driven by grief and anger, yet he found himself at a crossroads where the pursuit of justice blended with the need for healing. Life in the town was beginning to shift. The dialogue he encouraged had sparked something deeper among its residents. But Garrett knew that true closure would not come from vengeance or blame. It lay in accepting the past while looking forward to a future free from the cycle of violence that had claimed not only Clara but so many others like her. He realized that healing would require patience and understanding, not just for himself but for the entire community. With each day he felt a flicker of hope grow stronger within him, a part of Clara's spirit urging him to continue promoting compassion over conflict. Garrett understood that seeking truth often came with a heavy cost, challenging him to confront his own pain rather than letting it consume him. As he exhaled slowly, he felt ready to embrace this new mission, honoring Clara's memory not with rage but with love and a commitment to building bridges instead of walls.